What's up, guys, and welcome back to MoAn Inc. If you guys are new here, well then, hello. My name is Erica, and it is lovely to have you joining us today on the channel, because today's video will be a deep dive into Jason and the Golden Fleece's Book 3, which means that we'll be diving into, finally, some narrative surrounding Medea. So before we can get into that and introduce you to her witchy ways of Greek mythology, please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you know every single time I post in the future. And now that you have so kindly joined me on this little nerdy corner of the internet, let's get into the video. So the way this book opens is actually by the narrator, who's Apollonius of Rhodes. He comes into the story and interrupts the narrative to evoke a muse. And specifically, he speaks to Erato, and he asks Erato to help him tell the story of how the men are going to overcome the impossible task that Aetes sets for them, King Aetes of Colchis sets for them, with the help of Aphrodite. Now that is really, really important because that was highlighted in the last book. Phineas said that exactly, that Aphrodite is going to be the goddess that helps them. So when Apollonius steps in here, it just reminds all the audience that Aphrodite is our main goddess of help. Now, when the narrative actually picks up, right, when we actually see the men on the boat, they are now, if you guys remember from the last book, they've docked themselves in this like little river, sort of off, not like off the coast of Colchis, like they're very much still in Colchis. They're just off the side of the main city where the palace is. So that's where they're kind of hiding at the moment, right? And the men are kind of getting themselves ready, putting on their armor, being like, how are we going to go to the palace? Who's going to go to the palace? Blah, blah, blah. Having a little staff meeting, shall we say. And as they're doing this, we cut for the first time to the gods. Now, the gods in particular that we meet right now are Hera and Athena. And hilariously, Hera is watching them and she's just kind of like, I so badly want to help these guys because we both know that Aetes is a fucking nut job. So I want to make sure that they manage to do this task, whatever it is that Aetes decides to set them, it's going to be a success. But how? Like, what the hell am I supposed to do in order to help them when I don't know what Aetes is going to say? I don't know what kind of powers he has in order to, ensure the safety of the Colchians. I don't know what he's going to do, but he's crazy. And I know that for certain, and I want to help. Athena, what do you think we should do? Athena, despite being the goddess of wisdom, has no bars for the queen of the gods, right? This bitch is standing there with like a blank expression on her face. And she just looks at Hera and she's like, I got nothing. So whatever you say, I think we should do. Hera picks up on this and Hera decides that what they should do together is go to Aphrodite. Because when they go to Aphrodite, they hope to convince her son, Eros, to go and shoot Medea, who is Aetes' daughter. Because if they have an inside job, right, if they have like an insider in the palace who's going to help Jason, it is more likely that he will succeed in whatever it is that this crazy task is going to be, because Aetes is, again, psycho. So that's what they do. Okay, the goddesses, they basically pack up and they go to Aphrodite's house in order to convince her of this plan. And when they get there, Aphrodite's just kind of chilling out. She's on her sofa. She's like, come sit down. I never see you. You guys are supposed to be like major goddesses. How come you're never around? Which again, odd little note that it's like clearly they don't talk all that much. But anyways, not the point of the scene. The goddesses take a seat and they explain the situation to Aphrodite and they ask for her help, right? Exactly what I just said. They ask her to go to her son, to convince her son to shoot Medea because that way it's going to help Jason. Now, they do make it explicitly clear in this conversation that they're not really out to help Jason because of who Jason is, right? Surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, they're not really taken by him as a hero or as a person. They're not like, oh, Jason needs all the help. We need to make sure that Jason is successful because Jason is right. None of that. In fact, the reason why they want to help Jason so much is because they fucking hate Peleus. And Peleus is the guy that gave Jason this impossible task. So really, they just want to spite Peleus and they're going to use Jason in order to do that. Which, fair, honestly. So very long meeting short, Aphrodite ends up agreeing and the goddesses leave her house and she goes to find her son, Eros. Now when she goes to find Eros, she actually finds him doing like kiddie shit, right? And I don't know how else to explain that aside from kiddie shit because he's outside And he's playing with like a bunch of games, right? So he has these like knuckle bones and he has this ball and he's hanging out with his friends and they're, doing all of these little kid things. The whole point of that is that he is distracted, right? He is distracted and he's living his best life as the little kid that he is. And his mother stoops in, and as he's playing a game with a ball, she actually comes over and catches the ball. And that's what gets Eros's attention. And Eros kind of turns to her and is like, "What are you doing? I'm playing with that." And Aphrodite holds the ball too high for him to get and says, "I'm gonna give you this back as long as you go and you shoot Medea and you make her fall in love with Jason." Like, that's the level of like, I need to make you do shit, and so this is how I'm gonna force you. Like, it's just so childish and it's so perfect for the gods, because Eros, as this is happening, he doesn't just go, "Oh, okay, mom, yeah, no problem." He actually starts tugging at her dress. And he has this moment of being like, "No, mom, I want to play with the ball. Mom, give me back the ball. Come on, mom." Which means that Aphrodite holds the ball a little bit higher and is like, "Go and do what I fucking asked you and you'll get this thing back." And Eros, in a strop, he picks up his arrow and he sort of stomps off with his bow in the other hand. And he's like, "Fine, I'll go do this thing and I just want to play with my ball." After that, perfect description, in my personal opinion, of the gods and their relationships to one another by Apollonius. And as Eros is making his way down to the palace at Colchis in order to shoot Medea, that we actually cut back to the men on the boat. And when the men are standing on the boat, we hear what their meeting is. And it's Jason basically telling everybody on the boat, "I've got this plan. Here's what I think we should do." And his plan is that he wants to take a minimal amount of Argonauts. So in fact, it's just going to be him and 2 other Argonauts. But they're going to go to the palace first and foremost with the 4 sons of Phrixus in order to show Aetes, because they've been warned that he is not a very hospitable guy. And so this will hopefully show him that they come in peace, for lack of a better phrase, and they just want the Golden Fleece as like a friendship token so they can bring it back to Greece, right? So that's the big plan. And he does put forward to the men that if they don't like this idea, they can speak up. But luckily for him, all the men actually think it's a brilliant idea, and they think that it's more likely that Aetes will receive him well if they go this route. So the men put on all of their armor and they gear up to go to the palace of Aetes. And when they step off the boat, we have Argos, who is the eldest son of Phrixus, right? We met him in the last book, if you guys weren't there. He's been sort of like the main talker of all the sons of Phrixus, and he's going to lead them to the palace, right? So they all start walking. And actually, I wanted to mention a note here that has nothing really to do with the narrative, but that does have everything to do with the mood. Because last episode I said it was kind of ghoulish, and I have said the word eerie. I definitely said it in the last episode as well, and that's sort of how Colchis is, right? It's like there's a fog hanging over all of this. And in this moment, we get a description that is, I think, really good for the scene setting of how the mood has changed. Because this small description, we don't get a lot of detail with it, is that Apollonius notes that to the Colchians, when the people of Colchis die, there are 2 ways that they handle the dead. So the first way is that when women die, they are buried in the ground, right? So there are no like mounds that are sort of like for them. They're just buried within the earth. But the men are actually wrapped up and they are hung in the trees. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is because when the men get off the boat in order to walk towards the palace, that they're walking among the trees, and hanging above them are all of these like sacks with all of these men who are dead. All of these dead bodies are hanging above them as they walk through this like foggy forest to the palace of Aetes. Okay, so it is a ghoulish place to exist. It is a dark place to exist. It is supposed to be this like, ooh, what's happening there? This foreign land, this spooky land, Aetes. It's all supposed to put you off, basically. And I wanted to mention that because I do want to make it clear that is the whole point of this narrative. It's not that they're just going to this foreign land and it's like, oh, look at these people. They might be friendly. They might not be. There is a lot of foreshadowing that is going on in the physical description of this place. Sets the tone, sets the mood. Anywho, when the men actually approach the palace of Aetes and they walk inside, we have the sons of Phrixus' mother who sees them first, right? We do get a whole description of like everybody that lives in the palace and like all of their roles and King Aetes and who his wife is and Medea and blah, 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 right? You get the picture. But the main thing is that we have Chalciope, who is the mother of the sons of Phrixus, see them approach first. And she is elated to see her kids. She's thought that they abandoned her, that they went off on like this suicide mission to go all the way to Greece. Like she didn't see how that was going to happen. Or even if they did go, she didn't know if they would ever come back. She was having a full-on emotional meltdown in their absence, and seeing them has made her thrilled. So when she has this moment of basically going over to them, hugging them, yelling, not lamenting, but like crying and sort of being like, oh my God, I'm so glad that you're home. This not wakes up the palace because everybody's awake, but this kind of gets everybody's attention. So they all end up around the sons of Phrixus, including Aetes and Aetes' wife. So much so that actually there starts being a huge feast that is being prepared for all of them to welcome them home. And the reason why that's important to mention is because as all of this faff is happening, right, as everybody's kind of running around, getting meat, cooking things, sacrificing things, hugging everybody, all of this excitement means that Eros can come in completely undetected. Eros waddles his way through the palace and ends up finding Medea, who has come out to see the welcome of the sons of Phrixus, to see Argos getting hugged by his mother, who is Medea's sister. And she can see the strangers as well. And she's just kind of standing there minding her own business until Eros waddles over and he shoots her with an arrow. And this is where everything changes. Because Medea looks at Jason and she is so infatuated by him. Like, we are told that she immediately starts blushing. Her heart is booming. She has no idea what's going on. She's kind of embarrassed by her reaction because she's like, where the hell did this come from? It's your typical love at first sight infused by the gods. So it is powerful. Let's not forget that. So Medea's getting flustered in the corner, and that's when everybody is called to sit at this table where this feast, this banquet, is going to happen. Which means that Medea also goes to sit at the table, but again, she's blushing, she's a little bit overwhelmed, but everybody sits down to have a good time. And this is where Aetes asks the sons of Phrixus, what's gone on? Like, why have they come back so soon? What happened when they were away? And who the fuck are the strangers? Argos catches us up on basically everything that happened in the last book. So he tells us, that his ship, him and the boys' ship, as they were on their way to Argonauts, it broke, it hit a storm, they ended up on this plot of land, they end up running into Jason and his men. Jason tells them of their thing that they have to do to go get the Golden Fleece, and so that's why the sons of Phrixus have brought them to Aetes, right? So he catches us up on everything that we've already seen and everything that we know, and he just tells this to Aetes, and he obviously, buffers it by being like, I didn't bring them here so that you necessarily help them, but I know that we have some family lineage sort of up there somewhere, so we are kind of related. I think we should be hospitable. It seems like they're in a bit of a spot, shall we say? And I want to help them, but you're the king, you can do whatever you want to. I am not here to tell you how to do your job. Which, look, Argos handled that the best he could, but it wasn't enough because he is within that, despite him being like, it's your thing, it's your job, you can do it, blah, 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 like you're the king. He is still asking Aetes to give up the Golden Fleece in friendship, which we were warned in the last book was a bad idea. And it proves to be a bad one right now. And that's because when Aetes hears this, he's not sitting around contemplating the idea, right? My man doesn't sit at this table and is like, interesting. I wonder why the sons of Phrixus trust him. Maybe I should trust him. We don't normally have visitors here. I'm not known as being really hospitable. No, none of that happens. And instead, Aetes is furious. He is raging. I mean, he is so angry. You can basically see the steam. This is not in the Greek, but this is exactly how I picture it. You can basically see the steam coming out of his ears. He is so mad. And when we hear Aetes speak, we hear why this was a terrible idea and what exactly Argos was talking about in the last book. Because Aetes, what we find out, was not hearing that these men need help. He wasn't hearing that they're in a bit of a predicament, that they need a leg up, that they have an issue back home. None of that went in. All he heard was that these men want to take the Golden Fleece. These foreign men have shown up. They have managed to convince the sons of Phrixus that this is a good idea, but that's not why they're here. No. In Aetes' head, these men are here because they are trying to steal his throne and they're trying to take over his land. And he is not about to have any of that. So Aetes goes on this rampage where he basically is like, who the do you think you are, coming to this land, trying to take it from me? I know what you guys want to do. I've seen the likes of you before. This is not happening. I'm not giving up my throne. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I am the son of Helios. Touchy much? Remember how I said that Jason showed up with 2 of the Argonauts? Well, one of the Argonauts is Telamon, who's big Ajax's dad. And he's sitting near Jason, and when this whole speech comes at them, all of these accusations, my man Telamon does not take this well. He is pretty mad that this foreign king is, one, not being hospitable, and therefore he's not respecting Zeus's power, because in the ancient world, Zeus is sort of like the protector of guest friendship. So this is like a direct hit to Telamon and to Zeus, in his opinion. And he feels incredibly disrespected. So we're told that actually Telamon wants to stand up and wants to talk. And Jason is the one who puts out his hand, calms Telamon down, and he takes over to speak to Aetes. And he says probably the worst thing that you can say to anyone who's mad, because Jason, with his hand, calms Telamon down, turns to Aetes and goes, King Aetes, please calm down. Who in their right mind thinks that telling someone who is angry to calm down is going to help their case? It's just one of those rookie mistakes. It really shows you how young Jason is, because every time he speaks, as you guys have heard in this whole series, I tend to be like, he's not really good at talking. He doesn't really know what he's doing. There's a king in front of him who we know is a savage, right? And that's because that's the word that's used to describe him. We can get into the analysis of barbarians and foreigners and how the ancient Greeks saw them and why he's described as savage. That's a whole other story, right? We're not bringing that into this. But the Greek that describes him is that he's a savage, he's terrifying, he will kill you without so much as an explanation and without any hospitality, any guest friendship. That doesn't exist in Colchis. And yet Jason thinks it's a good idea to tell this man to calm down. Thank you for your incredible insight. Anywho, despite that terrible opening, Jason does deliver some points. It's annoying when we have to do this because I spend a lot of time slating Jason, and then I've always got to be like, you know what, credit where credit's due. And this is one of those moments, because when Jason actually starts talking to Aetes after he initially tells him to calm down, he actually tries to give Aetes a deal. What I mean by this is that he says to Aetes that if Aetes is to not back down, but basically kind of give up a little bit of his control and a little bit of his anger and hand over the Golden Fleece and friendships, that they can just bring it back to Greece with total peace, then not only is that going to be good for their friendship, but it will also be good for Aetes' reputation. Because what Jason suggests is that if this happens, he will go back to Greece. He will tell everybody that Aetes is an incredibly powerful man. He's a phenomenal guy, very hospitable, all of this. So he can dispel, basically, all of the bad rumors that are currently out there about Aetes, which will obviously work in Aetes' favor. But further than that, Jason also says that it's going to be great for them because he promises if they are to ever hit any kind of issues, any kind of hostility with anybody else, that Jason offers his alliance. So Jason basically says, not only is this going to help you and your reputation, but it'll also help the reputation regarding you now have reinforcements from Hellas, what they call Greece in the book, because in ancient Greece, it wasn't called ancient Greece, it was called Hellas. So he says, you have these allies in Hellas who will come and help you. And that will also mean that then a lot of the foreign tribes are going to stop being dicks, basically. Surprisingly, this kind of cools Aetes off a little bit. And in fact, Aetes is calmed to such a degree, because he's not calm. We'll see in a hot second, he's not actually calm, just wait. But in this moment, he gets a hold of himself, and he says to Jason and the men that actually, if they really want the Golden Fleece, he's not going to give it a hard no. But what he will do is he's going to give them a task, a quest, if you will. A nice, heroic challenge. Aetes sets the challenge that Jason must plow the fields of Colchis. Now, specifically, he's got to plow one of them. And more specifically, this is not an easy task because Aetes, being the son of Helios, does not have regular bulls that you would expect, right? He doesn't have a regular field that you would expect. It's not as simple as yoking these bulls, plowing the field. No, of course it can't be that simple. Aetes details that actually the bulls that he uses to plow the fields breathe fire, yeah, and they are giant. So, so there's that to handle. And Jason has to pop okay, you can tell that I've never been around farming or whatever, but like the contraption that goes over the bulls, he's got to put that shit on, right? Aetes is not gonna put that on them. But yeah, so Jason will have to tame these bulls in order to put the plowing contraption on them, and then he'll have to plow the fields with them. And further than that actually when you plow the fields in Colchis, because nothing is ever ordinary in mythology, especially not fields and grain, heaven forbid. No, that actually when you plow the fields, that within the soil there are like sown the teeth of the serpent that guard the Golden Fleece. And so therefore, as they are plowing, there are like these grain warriors that pop up. I literally don't know how else to describe them aside from like wheat warriors. Every celiac's nightmare. So they plow the fields, the warriors pop up from the grain, from the soil, and Jason will have to slay all of them as well, right? So he's got to plow the fields, he's got to tame these terrifying bulls, he's got to defeat these monsters, and then make sure, well, monsters, I mean, like they're just like, you know, soldier things. So he's got to defeat them, make sure that the giant bulls are dealt with, and then he's got to make sure that the actual field is plowed. Jason, hearing this, understands that this is supposed to be impossible and he does not know what to do. In fact, we're told that he has a whole moment sitting there in silence and just staring off into space, being like, what the fuck did I get myself into? But we have to give Jason a lot of credit here, because even though we're told he has this moment where he doesn't know what he's going to do, he doesn't know how he's going to react, he handles it like a champ. He doesn't show it. He doesn't exude any kind of nervous energy. He takes a moment to think for himself, and then he tells Aetes that he'll do it. Jason accepts the task not because he necessarily thinks that he can do it, right? And he does voice this, right? He doesn't, you know, he's not brash about anything. He's not deluded about his own strengths. And that's something I really like about Jason's character, that he's not standing around being like, I'm this great guy. No, like Aetes told him to do this task, and Jason realizes, and he says this out loud, that this is the only way he's going to get the Golden Fleece. And if he doesn't get the Golden Fleece, he's going to die, right? Like he can't go back to Greece. Peleus is going to be there. Peleus is probably going to kill him and ambush him on the way back. He knows that the journey might kill him on the way back. He knows he shouldn't have even gotten this far in the first place. And so he accepts because he thinks if he's going to die anyways, he may as well die trying. Aetes is thrilled to hear that Jason accepts the challenge, and he then dismisses everybody from the table. So Jason leaves, and so does he and his men. With Jason and his men also go the eldest son of Phrixus, so Argos walks off with them. And as their backs are turned and they're walking towards the boat, we cut to Medea, who is just staring longingly after Jason. And she is now shitting bricks after hearing this, because she knows her dad is crazy. She knows this task is ridiculous. And again, she has just been infused by all of this lust and love and just is actually obsessed with Jason. So she is heartbroken and terrified about the task that has just been laid down in front of them, right? And she feels kind of powerless. So what does every woman do when they feel powerless in mythology? It is awful to read these scenes, but obviously we have to bear in mind the time period, we have to bear in mind who's writing, we have to bear in mind the patriarchal society, because Medea, even though she's incredibly powerful, because she feels so overwhelmed, she runs off to her room to cry. Yeah, we have a priestess of Hecate that is a sorceress, right? She's got all these amazing powers and shit, and she goes off to her room to cry. Anyways, I really don't want to focus on Medea having her little strop, because it is quite a long scene, and it's a lot of Medea being like, oh no, what should I do? I feel so much grief, blah, blah, blah. And I just think it's a waste of time, because Medea's about to be very helpful. But just so that you know, that does happen. And as that's happening, we cut back to Jason and the men, who are now walking back to the ship. And when we cut back to them, we actually cut back mid-conversation. And we hear Argos, who's the son of Phrixus. So we hear Argos suggesting a plan to Jason. And he opens it by being like, I know you're not going to like this plan. I know that you're probably going to say no, but I'm going to say it anyways, because I think this is our best shot of being successful. What I think you should do is that there is a daughter of Aetes who is a priestess of Hecate, which means that she has a lot of potions, she knows the herbs, she's really good at her job, she's very powerful, and she is a favorite of the goddess. And I think she would be a great help. So my plan is that we go to my mum, minor intrusion, her name is Chalciope. So we should go to my mum and have her convince Medea to help us instead of us going straight to Medea. I think we go through the mum and then she goes to Medea and then Medea tries to help us. I think that's gonna be our best shot. Jason only replies when they get back to the boat. And when they get back to the boat, he kind of explains the situation and he says, this is what Argos just suggested. He suggests that we put all of our fate into the hands of a woman. Yep, you gotta fucking love it and point it out when things like this are mentioned. But so he's like, Aetes is super fucking mad. He's had this impossible task set to us. I'm scared shitless about it. And if the woman is the only way that I'm gonna succeed, we gotta fucking trust her. But obviously, we're a team. You guys are gonna tell me if you think that's a terrible idea because I trust you guys and you guys have helped us so much. So what do you think? Again, another great tick for Jason. I know you guys are gonna leave this series being like, I've got really complicated feelings about Jason now. But he does have these moments of being really good. And I think constantly seeing him refer back to the team and ask them for advice before he makes any solid decisions, even though, yes, it shows us that he's a little insecure as a leader because he always needs the advice of others in order to make any decision, I actually think is a really strong point for him. I actually think it's a really good thing that he's constantly relying on people who are more experienced, who are older, who are better. So when he presents this to everybody kind of sits quietly for a moment and they're thinking. And it's actually Peleus, who is Achilles' dad again. So he's the one who speaks up. He has some real hard-hitting words for Jason, where he, very long speech short, you guys, he says, this is a really shit situation, and I wouldn't blame you for backing out. However, you have to either do it or you don't do it. You can't half-ass it, okay? You're either gonna go in there and you're gonna be super powerful and we're gonna go to this Medea girl and we're gonna get all of her help. Actually, to be fair, he doesn't say Medea, he says the young girl, but he's talking about Medea. So if you want to do this, then go and get yourself ready, keep your promises, and go and do this task. But I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to back out from this because this is fucking ridiculous. Now, when he says this, actually, a lot of the men agree, and a lot of them start offering themselves forward to take on the task instead of Jason, right? So they actually give him the bandwidth, they give him the room to backtrack if he wants to, which, again, I really like. The son of Phrixus, Argos, actually interrupts all of them as they're offering themselves forward, and he says to them, it's incredibly brave that you all are offering yourselves forward. However, this is our last resort. The first resort is that Jason goes and he does it by himself. The second is that we manage to convince Medea to help him. And the third is that you guys can step in. So thank you very much, but we're gonna go through the first 2 stages first, and then we'll come back to this one if those fail. As this huge discussion is happening on the boat, we do then get a bird sign, one of the first in this book. That's not true. It's, I think it's like the 3rd or the 4th. But either way, we get a nice bird sign here where we have a dove that is flying away from a hawk, and very long bird sign short that the dove gets away and the hawk falls and it like is in somebody's lap. Why didn't I write that down? I think it falls into Jason's lap. It's dead either way, right? The dove should have died. It should have been caught by the hawk, but it wasn't. And the hawk instead ends up dying. And Mopsos, who's one of the Argonauts that is there specifically because he reads bird signs, he interprets this as a good sign because doves are sacred to Aphrodite. And so he's like, look at that. It means that it's going to be in our favor. Medea's probably going to help us. Fabulous. Let's go ahead with that. So he encourages all of them to go and start praying to Aphrodite in order for the goddess to hear them and to like them. And obviously, but unobviously, it's always a shock when this happens, but it's always like I could have seen that happening. Aetes is still in a bad mood, and this, unfortunately, makes him even more in a bad mood, and he has a little moment where he's just, like, yelling, and he's really annoyed, and long scene short, all the men just ignore him. They kind of, like, let him have his moment in the corner, where for some reason, praying to Aphrodite and relying on Medea is a problem, and all of the other men are just like, shut the fuck up. So they leave him to do his thing in the corner, and the men actually take up the anchor from where they are and pull the boat round. Because, as I said at the start of this, they are off in the corner, and not that they're away from Colchis, again, they're away from the city. So now they are moving the boat from where they are, just closer to the city, so that there's easier access now that Aetes has basically allowed them to be there. However, As this is happening, we cut to Aetes, right? So the men think, okay, yeah, he's kind of crazy, but he's let us be here, so that's okay. We're going to do this task, blah, blah, blah. And Aetes, Aetes has other plans. So we cut to the psycho himself, and he has wasted no time getting a meeting together of the Colchians. And they all meet on this plane, and he says to all of them, this task is impossible. It's supposed to be impossible. So it's going to be a real joy for us to watch. And when this Greek hero succeeds, I am going to burn the ship and kill all of his men. And the Colchians love this, right? They're like cheering, they're super excited. And that's the scene. But the reason why I'm mentioning that is because it's important to know Aetes, again, as I keep stressing, he does not think that this is going to go well. And in fact, he's hoping for that. Okay? That helps you guys understand the sort of fallout of this, is if I keep stressing that nobody wants us to go well. Jason is terrified. Everyone thinks that this is a death sentence. Aetes hopes it's a death sentence. Anyways, as all of the Colchians are cheering Aetes on and they are super happy with his plan of destruction for the foreigners, we cut to Medea, who is asleep, right? She's napping. She was so overwhelmed, you know, don't you remember, guys? She had her whole, oh my God, what do I do? And because, again, when women in these stories, think to Penelope, right? Like when women in these stories are overwhelmed and they cry, they have to take a nap right after that. So she, it's just so absurd. But anyways, she takes a nap, and as she's asleep, we cut to what's going on in her head, and she's having all of these, they're dreams, but they're also equally nightmares. And that's important to highlight, because when Medea's asleep, she dreams that Jason wants to get the Golden Fleece from her father, not because he wants to bring it back to, you know, Iolcus, and he wants to help, you know, his mother, and he wants to help his parents, or his father really more so than his mother. But, you know, it has nothing to do with that in her dream. It has nothing to do with picking up this Golden Fleece as this task. And in her dream, it has everything to do with the fact that he loves her and he wants to bring her back as his wife. So this foreshadowing, if I ever fucking saw it, really distresses Medea when she's asleep, and she wakes up and she is crying. She's quite upset. She doesn't know what to do, and she's scared, quite honestly, of her dream. Reason being is because we hear in this speech, it was her ability in her dream to choose the stranger over her family. That was something that scared her, which is good, right? That's a good thing. We see a little bit of sane Medea before she starts her little downfall, but this is good, okay? And that's why it scares her. Her brashness, her reaction are things that make her wake up, that jolt her into reality, and she doesn't know what to do. However, through this long speech, she ends up coming to the conclusion that what she wants to do at the end of the day is actually help the stranger, right? She realizes that she loves Jason too much, even though this dream really scared her. She knows that it is what she is supposed to do. Again, not that she's supposed to do it, but because gods have got involved, Aphrodite got involved, Eros got involved, so she doesn't really have a choice. And we do need to point that out, that she is now inflicted by a goddess. So when she comes to this conclusion that, like, I need to help them, and my dream kind of showed me that, and I have the ability to switch sides, and that's obviously not the best thing, but I do really love him and it's the right thing to do, we are all kind of screaming with Medea. And in fact, her plan, she decides she wants to try and convince her sister to convince her sons that it is going to be best for them if Medea helps, right? So we've actually got these two plans, right? Argos, who's with Jason, that has convinced all of the men, we need Medea's help, so I'm going to go talk to my mum, who's going to talk to Medea, who's hopefully going to convince her. Medea's already convinced. So Medea is now hoping to go to her sister, who's going to go to her sons to convince them that she should help. So everybody actually, minus Chalciope, is in on the plan without having spoken to one another. Wonderful. So Medea musters up all of her strength, and she gets up out of bed, and she's going to go to Chalciope to go and try and, you know, effectively convey this plan to her sister, right? And as she gets up, she tries 3 times to go to the door, right? She sort of walks over to the door, and then she goes, oh, what am I doing? And she walks back to her bed, and then she goes back to the door, and she's like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then she hits the, you know, the door handle, and she's like, oh no, I can't really do this. This is a lot. And then she goes back a 3rd time to be like, oh, I'm going to do this. And on her way back, she does, again, a very typical thing where she literally walks back to her bed and she's so overwhelmed she face plants. She can't make the decision to go and to decide what to do. And so when she walks back to her bed, she face plants onto the mattress and she's just like, I don't know. The best part is that as she's having her meltdown, in amongst going to and from the door, she's opened the door. And so when she's having a little meltdown, a serving girl passed the door and sees Medea face down on her bed crying and like moping. And the serving maid is like, what the fuck? So she goes straight to Chalciope and is like, your sister's having a fucking moment and I think she needs your help. Hearing this, Chalciope, remember the only person who's not in on this grand plan that everybody's had by themselves, she runs over to Medea, she goes into her room and she tries to console her, right? So she goes up to her and she's like, why are you so upset? Why are you crying? What's happening? Is there anything that I can do to help? Did you see the downfall of our father? Did you see the downfall of our kingdom? Did you see the downfall of someone? Did you see my sons are going to be killed? Because that is the most important thing to me. And if you saw anything about my sons, you better tell me now. Which, what a way to make it about her. Like, you see your sister crying and distressed and you start off really well. And then you're like, was it about me? Get your head out of your own ass. But anyways, she's there to help. So Medea realizes in this moment that, again, she's got to convince Chalciope that her sons are in danger. So actually that last line helps Medea because Medea really wants to help Jason, but if she convinced Chalciope that her kids are in danger, then that is going to mean that Chalciope will probably be on her side more. So when she's crying and she can hear Chalciope saying all of this, her brain starts working really fast. And she sort of like rolls up, her cheeks are all like tear streaked. She's all like red and puffy from crying. And she says to Chalciope that she does worry about Chalciope's sons, that she does worry about the sons of Phrixus and about their safety. And that is what is causing her so much distress. What you guys need to know is that Chalciope is basically eating out of the palm of Medea's hand. Okay, she is totally convinced that what Medea says is true. That when Medea is like, I'm terrified that our father's going to destroy your sons, Chalciope is like, you better help them in any way that you can because if they die, I die. Yeah, again, she manages to make this whole situation about her, but it works. Okay, so they have this very long chat where Medea says, I will obviously go and help them in whatever way that I can. I obviously am good with my herbs. I'm good with, sorcery and all of that sort of stuff. So I will do what I can to help your sons. This is all for them. It's definitely not for the stranger, who I'm just like madly in love with, this foreigner. Definitely not for him. But yes, for the sons of Phrixus, I will do anything. And obviously she is lying. But that's okay, because now Chalciope is on board, and that was the main thing. During the night, we see Medea's humanity come through. And actually, even though she is dreaming and she's sleeping, she's woken up because she is so distressed by what she has just asked her sister to do and what she knows is required of her. Right? And in fact, she has a moment where she doesn't know if she's just going to die, right? Like she should just sacrifice herself. She should probably kill herself. That's what she's thinking because she just wants to be out of the misery and pain that she's feeling. And even though she knows that she can give Jason the drugs in order to help him and in order to help, the strangers bring the Golden Fleece back, there might be a death sentence on her anyways, right? So that's the main thing. She doesn't know if should she just die now and save herself the delayed death, or if she should, wait it out, if she should see how it goes, if she should try and help Jason. There's a lot that's going on in her brain at night. And we see her really, really struggle with this decision. Okay, even though, yes, she does want to help Jason, and we obviously know that she will, she does have a very long soliloquy where she is expressing her doubt and she's expressing that maybe she should just end it all before it even starts because she doesn't know if it's ultimately the right decision or if she should let this unfold. And in fact, we have this really heart-wrenching moment to the point where I can already feel my eyes stinging. What the fuck is wrong with me? But we have this moment where Medea goes to get her casket of drugs, of, herbs and things like that. And in fact, when she places it on her lap, the intention is to find the drugs that will kill her, right? That she actually, throughout this whole conversation, when she doesn't know what to do, she doesn't know what to do, she finds herself walking over to the casket. She finds herself opening it on her lap in search of those drugs because she just doesn't want to have to do this unimaginable thing, right? And that is key. And so when she opens up this casket, she's about to do what we think she's all going to do. And here is the one who steps in to sort of banish these ideas from her mind. So here is the one that really steps in and that solidifies Medea's mind, right? Up until this point, she doesn't know what she's doing. And if it wasn't for Hera and this divine intervention now of two gods, Medea would not have made this decision. But either way, she waits out the night. she's alive at the end of the night, because Hera, again, is the one who is constantly, like throughout the night, she is constantly making sure that Medea doesn't do any of the destructive behavior that she had wanted to do. So Medea waits out the night, and in the morning, she decides that everybody, all of her and her 12 like handmaidens, they're going to go to the shrine of Hecate, and they're going to go there, and she's going to, figure out what to do, because she's a priestess of Hecate, and she's going to figure out what it best will be helpful. Wait, what? She will figure out what is the best way to be helpful to the men. That was the sentence I was trying to say. So Medea's handmaidens go and get a wagon. They sort of load it up with a bunch of stuff. All of the women walk along the side with her, and Medea gets in the front of the wagon so that they can drive to the plains where the temple of Hecate is. Right, so that's important that it's out of the city, and they drive through the city and just outside to go and do their prayers and ask for advice. So as all of that has happened, I forgot to mention, as I always do, I always forget something. I forgot to mention that Argos, one of the sons of Chalciope, he heard the news, and Medea had suggested to Chalciope that Jason go to meet her at the shrine of Hecate, right? So that's why she's gone, to ask for advice, to then meet Jason, to figure out what she's going to do and tell Jason her plan, right? She doesn't have a plan going into the temple of Hecate. As I said, she's going there to see what's going on, but Jason will meet her there. So now we cut to the men. Argos goes to tell Jason, you've got to go and meet Medea because she's willing to help us, but you need to have a meeting with her to see what the best mode of action is. And so they go to the shrine of Hecate as Medea is doing all of this stuff, and they bring along with them Mopsos, the guy who reads birds. So even though this has been very emotionally charged, there is a wonderfully comedic moment now, because as the men are walking towards this meeting with Medea, right, and they're going along this dirt path, we actually get a crow that starts speaking. Yeah, a crow. Very Natalie Haynes of this crow, right? This crow starts speaking from a tree, and we're told that Hera has infused the crow with a voice. And the crow basically, from this branch, is looking down at this group of men even, and is like, this prophet, this guy, Mopsos, my man, is not good at his job. If he was good at his job, he would know that Medea's not going to say anything to Jason if there were other men around. Obviously, like, she's completely infatuated by him. She's talking to the goddess. Why in the world would she talk to these randos? Okay, well, Argos is not a rando, but you know what I mean. Why would she talk in front of these randos when she's really infatuated by him? If he was good at his job, he would know this. It's logical. Now, not only is this comical because a crow is literally speaking, we have all these wonderfully, like, fantastical mythological moments, which always make me laugh because it's really when mythology is, like, pushing the fantasy narrative, and I love those. But this is particularly funny because Mopsos then, as the crow stops speaking, he stops walking and he says to Jason, I don't think it's a good idea if me and Argos come with you. You should go along to the shrine by yourself. You should have a private chat with Medea, and it's probably more likely that she's going to help you if we're not around. So we'll wait here and you continue along the road. Now, why is this comical? Well, as I was reading, you have the question of, is Mopsos really a bird reader? Or is he just someone who can understand birds when they shit talk? Like, it is a very valid question, because the bird speaks first, and then Mopsos doesn't even acknowledge the bird, but says exactly what the bird says. And as you're reading, you're like, is he actually just like Wild Thornberrys level chatting to animals, and that's why he's a bird reader? Or is it because he genuinely can read birds? I would like to believe he can just understand animals and it makes him seem smarter because animals tell him secrets. I don't know. It's just like this weird little narrative I have with Mopsos now where I'm like, I think he can just talk to birds. And even funnier than that, there is the question of like, do the birds think he's useless all the time and that they see right through him? And like, actually it's a conspiracy among all the animals that actually Mopsos is shit at his job, and all the animals are like, look at this fucking useless guy. It is just bizarre. But anyways, the whole point of that scene is that then Jason does go to meet Medea alone. So back to Medea, and she's doing all of her rites in the temple of Hecate. But we're told that she is completely distracted by the idea that Jason is about to show up. And so she's so distracted that as she's doing all of these rites and as she's trying to communicate with the goddess, she's constantly looking out and she's trying to spot Jason walking towards them. Finally, she sees him. And in fact, when she sees him approach, she's blushing, she's getting flustered. And the closer that Jason gets, he realizes that Medea is quite infatuated by him. Now, this is where Jason's character starts going really downhill, because we are told by Apollonius that Jason does notice that she must have had some sort of like divine power put on her to make her feel this way towards him. And even though it's not explicitly said in the ancient language, it's not explicitly said in the text that Jason takes advantage of it, he most certainly does. He opens the conversation with Medea and he says, I want you to feel open with me. I don't want you to fear me. I want you to understand that I'm here as your suppliant and as your guest. I know I need your help, and I'm so thankful for everything that you have agreed to do in coming here today. Thank you for helping me. I owe you so much. And in fact, I will offer you a number of great things in order to show my thanks. Now, Jason doesn't offer physical things, right? What he offers really is that her reputation will be great because she has helped him. He will go to Greece and he will sing her praises. He will make sure that people know that she is an amazing person in amongst all of this batshit crazy whatever that's going on in Colchis. Medea is so taken by Jason and by his words that actually Apollonius tells us that if she were able to, she would take off part of her soul and give it to Jason, right? That is how in love with him that she is. And instead, obviously, she can't do that. But what she does do is she takes the drugs, the herbs that she has been mixing with the help of Hecate. We're not actually given Hecate's voice. I want to make that clear. But she has been in the temple. She's been infused by Hecate. And so with the help of the goddess, she has been mustering up these herbs in order to help Jason. And she takes a bit of them and she hands them to him. And we're told that actually before this, Medea's eyes were on the ground and Jason was kind of looking aside because they were a little bit uncomfortable with one another, like face to face. But now that she hands over the drugs, they move their eyes to now look at one another, right? So they have this intense eye connection. Instead of making conversation though, Medea just gives Jason instructions of how to make the drugs work. And she says that right after this, he has to go and get the teeth. You know how I was saying about like the whole wheat like demon warrior people that come up, right? So they are, as I said, with the teeth of the dragon, and he has to go and get those in order to then use them tomorrow so that he can fight off the soldiers, right? This sounds really ridiculous, but like that is something that he has to do. Medea says once he goes and he does that and he brings them back to the ship and they're safe on the ship for tomorrow, he's got to go and bathe. He must bathe fully clothed, and he's got to also make a sacrifice with a sheep. At the same time, he's got to call up to Hecate to thank her for her help. And after he's done that, this has to be after midnight, but after he's done that, he can then leave and he can go to bed. Only if he has done this, that then the following morning, he can soak the drugs that she has just given him, and then he can anoint his body with this like salve, right, that the drugs are gonna make. So he can rub it on his body, and basically, he's going to become invincible. She not only tells him to put the salve on himself, but also on his weaponry. And then she gives him even more advice. And she says that after he has yoked the crazy bulls that breathe fire, that then, once all of those crazy soldiers pop up, that actually Jason should throw a stone in the middle of them. Because for some reason, that's going to make all of them attack each other, and they're going to kill each other over the stone. I don't know the logic behind it, but that's what Medea says. And Medea ends this on a really emotional note where she just starts crying. And she says to Jason that if he is successful, he will be going home. But she wants to know where his home is. She wants to know what islands he's going to pass by, where he's going to go, if he even happens to go past the island of Aea, where her aunt is, or even her other aunt, Pasiphae, if he happens to know anything about them. She wants to know all those stories because he's going to leave. And she begs him not to forget her name. Jason replies and does give her a big rundown of the islands that they're going to pass by. He also says that he mentions Ariadne, basically, and he says that because there was some sort of agreement when it came to Minos and obviously to Theseus with the whole Minotaur incident, he says understanding, we all say murder. But anyways, that because there was something like that, that basically Jason hopes that he will have the same thing with her father, where the two of them will come to some sort of agreement, or there'll be some sort of peace that's made, some sort of exchange, and everything will be hunky-dory. Medea has a tearful reply, and it's now that Jason hits probably the worst thing that he could do. And it's probably because he feels so bad, right? Like he's seeing Medea crying, he knows that Medea's kind of fucked herself over with her family, And so he basically says, forget everything I said. Forget about being like Ariadne, because that was a reason why she was crying. That she's like, I'm not like Ariadne though. He's like, forget all of that. That actually people of Greece will know your name. They will hear your name. They will worship you. They will love you. They will acknowledge you for everything that you have done for Hellas. And you will come back with me and you will share my marital bed, and they will love and respect you. Our people will love and respect you. And nothing will separate us until our death. So it does kind of come out of nowhere, right? We've got Medea, who's super emotional, and Jason clearly is just trying to squish the situation to try and make it as easy as possible. And as I said at the start of this, he knows that she has been inflicted by some sort of divine power. And so this is, it's just like everything that I was saying that was good about Jason is squished in this one scene. Squished to a teeny tiny pulp. Why? Why are you like this? We're told at the end of this that this was Hera's big plan, right? So at the start of this, when we knew that like the gods had this huge plan about how Aphrodite was going to help, and it's because of a maiden that Jason was going to be successful. This is it. It's all at the expense of Medea and of her well-being. And will she go crazy in a hot second? She will. But it's important to note that Jason takes advantage of the situation, and this is all going according to plan from Hera. And even though Jason is acting horribly, it is important to note that, again, it's Hera's plan. It is a plan that is written by the gods. This was made by the gods. This was all done by the gods. And so therefore, Jason is also kind of playing into their hands. And they're both kind of puppets due to Hera, but it does not exempt Jason of this fuckery, for lack of a better phrase. Because when they leave, right, so when they part ways, Jason leaves with his drugs and Medea goes back to the palace, and Jason isn't really thinking about this. Is that a surprise to anybody? So we hear that when Medea gets back to the palace, Chalciope, her sister, tries to question her, and Medea just goes off to sit in the corner because she still feels really bad about what she has to do. But she is also feeling elated, obviously, by Jason's promise of bringing her back to Greece and making her his wife. And she's just like, oh, this is great. But also she's crying, right? She is very distressed by this. When we cut to Jason, Jason's just thrilled that he has the drugs, right? So he shows up and he shows all the men. He's like, look what I got. Look at this amazing thing. She decided to help us. Woohoo! And all of the men are really excited by this, obviously. Aside from Aetes, we get this note that Aetes is sitting in the corner and he's biting his tongue and he's in a really bad mood and he doesn't want anything to do with anybody, and he's like, honestly, what is wrong with him? So the next morning, two of the Argonauts go to pick up the teeth. That was what I was looking for. They go to pick up the teeth from Aetes and bring it back to the boat. Right? But remember, as Medea told Jason, he cannot go to sleep at sunset, that in fact he must stay awake until midnight to do his whole bath thing. So the men bring these things, the teeth, back to the boat. All the men go to sleep, but not Jason. He does exactly what Medea has just told him to. So he goes to take a bath, but when he goes to take a bath, he has to put a cloak on, right? And he puts the cloak on that Hypsipyle gave him, which I don't know if that's a really weird thing to do, given that he just promised this other woman marriage, but he impregnated her. I don't know. It's like a weird thought that I've always had. Is it weird? Let me know in the comments. I think it's slightly weird that Jason has just said, I'm gonna marry you, thanks for the help. Here are the herbs, and now I'm gonna put on the cloak of the woman I impregnated in order to make sure that the herbs of my promised new wife work. Either way, he does it. So he does all of that, and we are told that actually throughout, his bathing and throughout his prayers to Hecate, that he is seized by fear, right? So everybody is nervous. Everybody is scared. Medea's scared. Chalciope's scared. The sons of Phrixus are scared. The men are terrified. They're terrified for Jason. And now we hear that Jason himself, in the middle of the night, by himself, he is also scared of what tomorrow will bring. So the following morning, Aetes wakes up and he puts on all of his armor, right? So he just, is looking his best. Basically, he's described as looking like Poseidon. He is so glorious in all of his armor because he is going to watch a lovely Greek man die, and he is thrilled. He's so excited about it. So he's described as sort of walking very happily, and he walks down to where the contest, the challenge even, will take place. And at the same time, we cut to Jason, who is getting himself ready, and he does, again, exactly what Medea told him, which is not only anointing his body with the salve, the herbs, to make him indestructible, but also doing that with his weaponry. So with his spear, with his shield, all of that sort of stuff also gets the herbs rubbed on them. So with all of this good energy, Jason goes to face his task at the plains of Ares. So for the end of this book, I will just kind of fast forward what happens on the plains of Ares, because obviously we all know that Jason is going to be successful. So I'm not going to really harp on this whole thing. I'm not going to really stretch it out and make it this like big moment, because you guys can read all of the drama in the book if you guys want to. It's actually not that long of a section right at the end of book 3. But basically what happens is he arrives at the plains, he's all, anointed up, and the first thing he has to do is yoke the bulls. Is that what happens when you put the thing on? You get the contraption on these terrifying fire-breathing bulls, right? Obviously against all the odds, Jason manages to do it, right? And it is quite a difficult thing, but he does manage to do it because he is invincible. Now, when these crazy fire-breathing bulls have now started plowing, because he kind of like shoos them away in order to start the plowing of the field, bear in mind that all of the Colchians are sitting around the field, right? So they're all watching this. Aetes is there, Medea is there, Chalciope is there, right? Everybody is there to see if Jason can really do it. And as he's doing this, as they're sort of plowing the field, the bulls are now plowing the field, he starts scattering the teeth of the serpent in order to have the warriors come up for him to fight. What's funny about this is that he has to like wait a period of time in order for these soldiers, these earthborn soldiers, to actually sprout. So he has enough time to actually run back to his men, get a drink of water, chill out for a hot second, and then he starts seeing the earthborn warriors pop up, right? And very long scene short, again, you can go and read this in more detail, but he does exactly what Medea suggests, which is that he throws the rock in the middle of them, and they all basically destroy themselves. Now, there are a few extra of these earthborn warriors, these wheat warriors, shall we say, for the nice alliteration. And Jason does just cut them down with ease with his sword. And as everybody is watching this, Aetes in particular is so annoyed by this that he actually gets up and he walks back to the palace, right? He doesn't even watch Jason finish the job. He can't bring himself to do it. He just gets up and he just stomps off to the palace. So it was now that Jason's task ends, and we are told on the last lines of the book that Aetes is not finished with them. That in fact, when he walks back to the palace, he walks back with a number of Colchians, and they are there to plot how they're going to kill these foreigners. And that is the end of book 3. Very exciting that you guys have finally met Medea. I apologize for how long this episode is. I know it's going to be longer than I think all the other ones in this series, because there's a lot that happens in this book. It is very, very dense. As I told you, the Argonautica is, even though it is very thin, so much happens, and I have done my absolute best in order to make this as compact as possible. But I don't want to leave out too much detail, and I don't want to leave out any jokes, as you guys know. So thank you guys so much for watching this book. Thank you guys so much for engaging with this content. And thank you guys so much for always wanting to read along with me, despite how long sometimes these videos are, and despite how crazy these stories tend to be. So don't forget that next week I'll be uploading the final book. I'll be uploading book 4, and we'll see exactly how the Greek heroes end up getting back to Greece. But for now, thank you guys so much, and I'll be seeing you next time with more videos here on MoAn Inc. So I'll see you guys then.